hear me? There was some concern about the mic. I'd rather talk to this one than hold something in front of my face. Just a little bit of background. When Steve asked us to do something last year, we thought it was quite a good idea. And if you look at the program, I'm supposed to be talking about the future of vegetable extract tanning. And in fact, there was supposed to be another Nigel standing here. He's in Mexico. And I'm not going to talk about the future of veg tanning, but I'm going to look at it in terms of veg tanning, the past, the present, and the future. And it's going to have a little bit of a mimosa vegetable extract, specifically African theme to it, because I feel a little bit of a fraud. I'm not a leather technologist. I'm not a tanner. I'm in fact a forester. But I have been involved in the wattle extract business for some 35 years. Seen it from the growing stages of the raw material through to the processing side, and in the last 15 years I've been involved in the commercial side, which is basically selling the product, interacting with our customers, the tanners, and I've learned a little bit about tanning, a very little bit. So if you bear with us, we're going to give you a little bit of a story about vegetable extracts, where they were, where they are, and maybe a little bit about where they're going. Just a little bit about the organizations. Forrestal Mimosa is a company that was started in the 1900s. It used to own the vegetable extract operations in Argentina, Bracho, and in Africa. And over time, the factories have been bought out by various people, and Forrestal became a commercial office supplying African mimosa extracts only. We used to in the 90s also supplied to Bracho. We also used to represent some of the Brazilian extract producers as well. But now we only supply out of Africa, primarily South Africa. And I am formerly the managing director of Forrestal. I'm actually now based in South Africa, and I'm responsible for Mimosa Extract Company, which is the commercial company of NTE, getting a bit complicated. NTE stands for Natal Tanning Extract Company. They are the actual manufacturer of the product. Go back to 1920, as you see there. They have two huge factories in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, producing about 40,000 tons of mimosa every year. So that tells you a little bit about who we are. Peter Atkinson is our leather technician based here in the UK. Peter's been involved with us for some 25 odd years. He's semi-retired, but we don't let him retire. Because we need him. So as you can see, if you're confused about what I'm supposed to be talking about, I'm even more confused because this is what it's about. Going to have a look at the past. And again, I'm not going to try and give you a lecture on how leather tanning, especially veg tanning, has moved over the ages. I think that is something that many people in this room are more favourite than I am. I'm going to look at it just from manufacturers of wattle extracts, or extracts, vegetable extracts per se. So just a little bit of history. As we all know, vegetable tanning is as old as history itself. I keep getting told that it's the second oldest profession in the world, and apparently there's no prize for guessing what the oldest profession is. Obviously, early man needed to clothe himself and needed to feed himself. In doing so, animals were slaughtered, and there was a raw material there that they realized they could utilize, and this is where it all started. And the initial substance used, I was told, is things like the brains of the animals. I can't imagine wearing something that has been tanned with an animal's brain, but that's how it was. But obviously that developed over time, and a lot of trial and error was done, and they found that vegetable extracts, leaves, bark, things like that, had something in it that preserved the skin, and that's how our industry sort of developed over the years. As I say, the rest is history. I'm not going to give a lecture on how things have progressed from pit tanning through to more modern drum tanning processes. But just to provide you with some insights into how the vegetable extract markets and industries have changed over time. This is should be for us a very depressing graph. You see the total vegetable extracts going back to the 1950s, which was the heyday of our industry. This is a graph that shows basically the three big commercial vegetable extracts used, so basically Quebracho, Mimosa, and Chestnut. And you can see a huge decline in the demand and supply of vegetable extracts, going through from the 1950s through to the 1960s. And obviously the question is asked, why? What has happened? And I'll try and answer some of that. Before I do that, just to give you some idea of how the vegetable extract industries have developed over the years. So if we look at Mimosa, it started basically commercially around the early 1920s in Africa, and then 20 years later in Brazil. Quebracho is a lot older, developed in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And this is where Forrestal Mimosa, it was the old Forrestal Land Timber and Railway Company, started in 1906. And then Chestnut, which is the oldest, goes back to 1850, somewhere around there, when they started to extract the tannins from the chestnut pods. In our industry, there was a huge flurry in the 1950s after the Second World War. There was this huge belief that there was a need for a lot of vegetable extract and a lot of veg leather, primarily for military purposes, for harnesses, for boots specifically. And it's actually quite interesting to know that there were a huge amount of factories that were constructed, a lot of them second-hand from other industries, and put up in the hope that this was going to be a huge growing industry. Many of them were never commissioned. Eventually they just were mothballed and became scrap value. And in terms of where the industry is now, we can count the producers on one hand, basically. In terms of Mimosa, there are 2 producers in Brazil, there's 2 in South Africa, there's 1 small one in Zimbabwe, there's 1 small one in Tanzania, and an even smaller one in Tanzania, which is up in the Lesotho Highlands. It's a very old factory, works on the basis of extraction in an open vat, wooden vat system, produce a very dark material. And then there's a small producer in Kenya. There is also a 3rd small producer in Brazil. In terms of Quebracho, you've got the 2 producers in Argentina. Chestnut is down to basically 1 in Slovenia and now 1 in Italy. And that's it in terms of commercial production of vegetable extracts in the world. There are obviously others who do Myrab. There are some who supposedly produce vegetable extracts in India and places like that aren't actually veg extracts. If you analyze them, they have some in. There's things like Kutch, there's Gambia. There is some in China. They have obviously Acacia mangium there, which does have a high tannin content. So, but the commercial guys on a large scale are the ones I named. This is just a graph that I showed previously, but this is the three main markets where the bulk of the veg extract was sold, going back to the 50s, 60s, 70s. So you can see these were big markets for us because this is where a lot of heavy sole leather was manufactured, and that was where our business was initially. And you can see the decline for all 3 of the main commercial products. This is just the same information but on a bar graph, just to try and show you how the demand for vegetable extracts has declined from the 1950s through to the year 2000. As I say, we should all be very depressed about this, but it's a process that we've gone through. We've had to adapt as we go forward. And this is where a lot of our business was in the 50s, was in sole leather. Obviously, Italy was a very important, and still is a very important market for us in terms of heavy leather, but less so. As you see the graphs, which I'll show just now, you can see that the demand even in Italy is going down year by year. This is Chapel leather, which again was a huge business for us in India. Obviously, virtually every person in India had a pair of Chapel sandals that was made from leather and had a leather sole. Now they've got a pair of sandals that's made of rubber or plastic, and obviously that side of our business has declined rapidly since the 1960s, 1970s. And surprisingly, another market that was very good for us was Japan. Again, every school child had a satchel. It was made from veg tan heavy leather. Generally, it was quite expensive, and it was given to the child generally by the grandparent who had the disposable income to pay the higher price. Obviously, modern day now, this has been replaced by synthetics and canvas, so that business has declined hugely for us. And as an example, we used to sell, just from South Africa, we used to sell some 20,000 tons of veg extract mimosa into Japan alone. So you can see how it's declined. Now we sell 1,500. It's a good year for us. So it's been a huge downturn in the use of veg extracts over the last 4 or 5 decades. The interesting thing about Japan, our agent was out visiting us last year and was telling us a little bit about the history. It's now the 3rd generation of a family member in the agency, and he was telling us that they started out not in the leather business, but they started out in fishing nets. And I said, well, what's the association or correlation between veg extract and leather chemicals and the fishing industry? And he said, well, nothing really. But they used to supply the chemical that protected the old fishing nets, which I assume were made of hemp or something like that. And if you didn't protect it and coat it, the same with a piece of, with a hide or a skin, it rots. And this is what they did. But then the Americans came along after the First or Second World War, introduced synthetics, and that disappeared. And they then, fortunately, got involved in the leather business. So it was quite an interesting anecdote for me, because I hadn't realized that this is what they did. But again, changing technology had a huge impact on them, and they had to realign their business going forward. Just looking a little bit at the present, we as an industry obviously have seen the decline, as you saw on the graphs, and realized that, well, what do? We just shut down the factories, reduce the raw material, the plantation area that we grow the trees on, or do we try and move with modern times? And that's what we've done over the years. Through research and development, we've looked at the base product that we have and modified it so that it's more suitable for rapid tanning, for better filling properties, for work on light fastness. Because of this switch away from heavy leathers to a semi-chrome process or a veg retan, we've had to look at the base product and modify it as best we can. Remembering that we're working with a very difficult product. It's not a lot that you can do with it. You can change its color, you can bleach it, you can darken it, you can infuse it with chrome, but there's not much more you can do with it. It's a natural product. So it hasn't been easy, but we have been really relatively successful in bringing it through and making it applicable for the more modern types of tanning going forward. Just a comment there, obviously more extract is now used in retannage, and as I said, we have developed or modified our base product to make it more suitable to use in modern tanning applications. This is just looking at the decline over from the 90s through into the current year. And again, you can see it continues to decline with an element of steadiness in the early 2000s. And if you look at, again, the 3 products over that same period, it's been basically Cabraccio that saw the biggest downturn initially, but they did pick up a little bit. Again, it depended a lot on the Italian market. Their big markets are obviously Italy and Mexico, where a lot of Vaqueta leather is made, and Cabraccio is used quite significantly in those applications. Chestnut, these numbers are not that accurate. We're not too sure whether they've settled at around the 10,000 or dropped off, because we don't get too much information on chestnut anymore. And then just bringing it to the current 2015. The dip there in 2008, 2009 was the global economic crisis. We obviously took quite a big hit there. It did recover a bit, but as you see, the decline continues for us. Quite depressing, looking at it from our perspective. again, just looking at that same period for the 3 different commercial vegetable extracts, a downward trend. And again, just to show that whole period, just to show you again those trends. What I did, I just extracted over that same period the three big markets that we used to have for vegetable extracts, where again a lot of sole leather, heavy leather was being made. And you can see Italy has taken the biggest knock there. India and Mexico have been fairly static, still important markets. Just look at Italy on its own. Again, not such a great slide to look at, but we're still here. It's still very positive. Just then looking at the future, this was quite difficult because when we looked in our crystal ball, we kept having power failures, so it was quite difficult to get a story out of where the future is for us. But as I say, we're still here. The positive thing for us is that we have raw material in the ground for the next 90 years. We have trees in the ground. Our producers, our shareholders who are the growers of the trees, the tree farmers are committed to this business. And as an industry, and that's all of us, Quebracho, Mimosa, Chestnut, are looking at the future in terms of where is the growth in the leather industry. Obviously automotive is the big buzzword, we hear it. We're all looking at developing products that can work in those applications. We're also, as an industry, we have a body called the Tanning Extract Producers Federation. We work together in a non-commercial way in terms of other applications for tannins. So we realize that our business is quite mature and that we are reliant on fashion, and the use of leather has a huge impact on us. But there are other applications out there, and we're all researching. The buzzword we have in amongst our group is we're looking for the next rocket fuel where we can use tannins in a big way going forward. But in terms of the leather business, I say we are committed. We have a huge resource out there that it's man-made in terms of Mimosa, in terms of Quebracho, it's a natural product that is regenerated. And we believe we've got, not to the extent we had in the 50s in terms of those huge volumes, but we've got a good business going forward. Just a little bit of just to confirm what I've just said. And I think, for us, as long as there are hides and skins available for tanning, there will always be a demand for vegetable extracts. And there has in recent times been an upsurge in the interest in using vegetable extracts as a tanning method, as opposed to some of the syntans, chromes, etc., etc. But whether it'll never swing back to where it was. And if you wanted to replace chrome and syntans with veg extracts, it couldn't happen. It just isn't the resource in the world. The pressure on land where the resource is grown, the raw material is grown, is too huge. So I can't see that the industry will grow much beyond the level it is now. Just not going to happen. So people say, oh, it's good, they replace chrome salts and syntans with veg, it'll be good for you guys. It'll be a good increase for us, but you can't replace it. It just isn't the raw material out there. Okay. Thank you very much. Have you got any questions, any ideas? I'm quite happy to answer them.
Thank you, Nigel.